The distress signal the hunter becomes the hunted. The galaxy had known peace under Kryn rule for 3 centuries. Commander Vexel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars pass by with the confidence of a predator that had never known fear. The Kryn Empire controlled 47 star systems, and every species they encountered had either submitted or been eliminated. It was the natural order of things. Vexel's scales shimmered under the bridge lights as he reviewed the daily reports. His species had evolved from apex predators on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. That legacy showed in everything the Kryn did. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, and their tactics brutal. They had never lost a war. "Commander?" his sensor officer called out, interrupting his thoughts. "We're detecting an unknown vessel in Sector 7-9. It appears to be a mining ship." Vexel's eyes narrowed. This sector was unclaimed territory, a region rich in rare minerals that the Kryn had been surveying for colonization. The presence of another species here was unacceptable. "Display the vessel," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a rather unremarkable ship. It was smaller than most Kryn warships, with a bulky design that suggested it was built for function rather than combat. Strange symbols marked its hull, written in a language Vexel had never seen before. "It's primitive," his tactical officer reported. "Basic fusion drives, simple energy shields. They're transmitting some kind of greeting message on multiple frequencies. Primitive species often are friendly," Vexel said with a dismissive gesture. "It makes their conquest easier. Hail them. Tell them this territory belongs to the Kryn Empire, and they are trespassing." The communications officer worked quickly, using the universal translation matrix that the Kryn had developed over centuries of conquest. A moment later, a response came through. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Human Confederation ship Prometheus. We're a civilian mining vessel operating in unclaimed space. We mean no harm and request peaceful passage." Vexel listened to the translated message. The voice was calm, almost casual. It reminded him of prey that didn't yet realize it was being hunted. "Human," he repeated, testing the word. "Another species to catalog. Tell them they have 2 options. Surrender their ship and themselves to Kryn authority or be destroyed." There was a pause before the response came. "Commander Vexel, we appreciate the offer, but we'll have to decline. This sector is indeed unclaimed by any galactic authority. We have as much right to be here as you do." Vexel's scales darkened with anger. In 300 years, no species had dared speak to the Kryn with such disrespect. He leaned forward in his command chair. "You dare refuse the Kryn Empire? Your primitive vessel cannot stand against our might. I will give you one final chance to surrender." "Commander," the human voice replied, and Vexel thought he detected something in the tone. Was it amusement? "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not refusing out of bravery. We're refusing because we don't recognize your authority here. If you wish to file a territorial claim, please do so through proper galactic channels." "Enough," Vexel roared. "Tactical, target their engines. Disable them. We'll take the crew as slaves and examine their technology." The Eternal Dominion's weapons came online, powerful plasma cannons that had reduced entire cities to ash. The tactical officer locked onto the human ship and fired. What happened next would change everything Vexel thought he knew about the galaxy. The first blood, the plasma bolts streaked across space toward the Prometheus. Vexel expected to see the primitive shields collapse immediately. Instead, the human ship moved. It wasn't a simple evasive maneuver. The vessel twisted and rolled with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for a ship its size, avoiding 2 of the 3 plasma bolts entirely. The third struck their shields and dissipated harmlessly. "Impossible," the tactical officer whispered. "Those shields, they're much stronger than our reading suggested." Before Vexel could respond, the Prometheus fired back. Small projectile weapons, primitive kinetic launchers that the Kryn had abandoned centuries ago in favor of energy weapons. Vexel almost laughed. Bullets against armor designed to withstand plasma? It was absurd. The projectiles hit the Eternal Dominion's hull. Then they exploded. Not simple explosions, but targeted detonations that punched through the outer armor and detonated inside, causing cascading failures across multiple systems. Alarms began screaming across the bridge. "Shields at 60%, the defense officer called out. "They're using some kind of penetrator rounds with delayed fuses. They're getting through our armor before detonating." Vexel's confidence wavered. "All ships, attack formation Delta. Surround them and fire at will." The Eternal Dominion wasn't alone. Vexel commanded a fleet of 12 warships, more than enough to subjugate an entire star system. The ships moved into position, forming a sphere around the human vessel. It should have been over in seconds. The Prometheus accelerated straight toward the nearest Kryn ship, still using those primitive fusion engines. But the speed, it was moving faster than anything that size should be capable of. The Kryn vessel fired repeatedly, but the human ship weaved through the weapon's fire with impossible precision. They're using predictive targeting algorithms, the sensor officer reported, his voice filled with disbelief. They're calculating our firing solutions before we lock on. The Prometheus passed within meters of the Kryn warship, close enough that their shields interfaced. As it did, the human ship released a payload of small objects. They attached themselves to the Kryn hull like parasites. Boarding devices? Vexel wondered aloud. The objects exploded simultaneously. Not large explosions, but precisely placed charges that severed critical connections. The Kryn warship went dark, tumbling through space as its power systems failed catastrophically. One ship disabled, Vexel's second-in-command reported, his voice tight with shock. How are they doing this? The Prometheus wasn't done. It continued its attack run, moving from ship to ship with a coordination that suggested extensive combat experience. Each pass resulted in another disabled Kryn vessel. The humans weren't trying to destroy them. They were surgically taking apart the fleet. Vexel watched in growing horror as his proud armada was systematically dismantled by a single, primitive mining ship. When the sixth vessel went dark, he made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Send an emergency signal to High Command, he ordered, his pride crumbling like dust. Tell them we've encountered a new species. Tell them they're dangerous. Tell them we need reinforcements immediately. The human response inside the Prometheus, Captain Elena Rodriguez, allowed herself a small smile. She was a veteran of 15 years in the Human Confederation Navy, though her current assignment was decidedly unusual. The Prometheus looked like a mining ship because it had been a mining ship, but 6 months ago it had been refitted for a very different purpose. Marcus, status report, she called to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Marcus Chen looked up from his console, his fingers still dancing across the controls as he managed their weapon systems. All targets neutralized without casualties, Captain. Their weapon systems are offline, but life support is intact. No loss of life on either side. Good. Sarah, how are our systems holding up? Engineer Sarah Okonkwo checked her readouts from the engine room via her neural link. Shields at 82% and recharging. Engines are running hot, but within acceptable parameters. The new armor is performing better than expected. Those penetrator rounds are working exactly as designed. Elena nodded. The penetrator rounds had been her idea, actually. When humanity had first ventured into the galaxy 5 years ago, they'd quickly realized they were behind in energy weapon technology. So instead of trying to catch up, they'd perfected what they already knew: kinetic weapons. Bullets that could punch through energy shields and armor before exploding internally were simple, reliable, and apparently quite effective against overconfident aliens. Captain, Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more serious. I'm picking up a transmission from the flagship. They're sending a distress signal. Let me hear it, Elena commanded. The translation came through their computers, and Elena listened as the Kryn commander called for help. She heard the fear in his voice, the shock of encountering something he couldn't understand or defeat. It was exactly what Earth Command had hoped would happen. They're calling for reinforcements, Marcus observed. Should we withdraw? Elena considered the question. The Prometheus had been sent here specifically to make contact with the Kryn Empire. Not peaceful contact. That had been tried twice before, and both times human diplomats had been captured and executed. No, this was a different kind of first contact. This was a message. How long until their reinforcements arrive? She asked. Sarah ran the calculations. Based on their faster-than-light technology, assuming they have ships within 10 light years, approximately 4 hours. Then we wait, Elena decided. Marcus, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. The Kryn have taken the bait. Captain, Marcus hesitated. You realize when those reinforcements arrive, we'll be heavily outnumbered. Elena's smile widened. That's exactly what we're counting on, Lieutenant. The Kryn Empire has spent 3 centuries thinking they're the apex predators of this galaxy. They've crushed 47 civilizations because those civilizations fought the way the Kryn expected them to fight. She stood from her command chair and walked to the view screen, looking out at the disabled Kryn ships drifting in space. Humanity doesn't fight fair, Marcus. We evolved as persistence hunters on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to work together, to use tools, to think 3 steps ahead of our prey. We learned that the biggest predator isn't always the most dangerous one. She turned back to face her crew, her eyes bright with anticipation. When those reinforcements arrive, they're going to learn something that every predator on Earth learned the hard way. When you corner a human, when you threaten what we protect, when you assume we're easy prey. She paused, letting the word sink in. That's when you discover that humans are the real beasts. Sarah's console beeped. Captain, I'm detecting multiple quantum signatures. They're opening slipspace portals. Already? Marcus checked his sensors. That's faster than we calculated. They must have had ships closer than we thought. The view screen showed tiers forming in space itself, as massive vessels began emerging from faster-than-light travel. 1 ship, 10 ships, 50 ships. The numbers kept climbing. Sarah, give me a count, Elena ordered, her calm voice betraying none of the adrenaline flooding her system. 217 vessels, Captain. Battleships, carriers, destroyers. This isn't a reinforcement fleet. This is an armada. They're bringing everything they have. Marcus turned to face Elena, his face pale. Captain, with all respect, maybe we should consider retreat. Even the Prometheus can't handle those numbers. Elena watched the Kryn armada assemble, ship after ship filling the space around them. Any sane person would run. Any logical commander would withdraw and report their findings. But Elena Rodriguez hadn't been chosen for this mission because she was sane or logical. She'd been chosen because she understood something fundamental about humanity. Humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by running from bigger predators. They became dominant by being smarter, more adaptable, and more dangerous than anything else that walked, swam, or flew. Marcus, she said quietly, send a message to the Kryn flagship. Tell them Captain Rodriguez wishes to discuss terms of their surrender. Our surrender? Marcus asked, confused. Their surrender, Elena corrected. And then activate Protocol Ghost. It's time to show them what happens when they hunt humans. Marcus hesitated only a moment before his fingers moved across his console. Across the Prometheus, systems that had been dormant came online. Hidden transmitters began broadcasting on frequencies the Kryn couldn't detect. And somewhere far beyond the edge of the system, other vessels received the signal and began their approach. The Kryn thought they'd called for reinforcements. They had no idea that humanity had been waiting for exactly this moment. They'd sprung the trap perfectly. On the view screen, the massive Kryn armada continued to assemble, their weapons powering up, their commanders confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had brought their full might to crush a single mining vessel. They had no idea they'd just walked into an ambush. Elena smiled again, but this time it was the smile of a predator who just cornered her prey. Let's teach them about human nature, she said softly. The real battle was about to begin. When predators meet prey, the armada arrives. War Master Threx stood on the bridge of the Immortal Conquest, the largest warship ever constructed by the Kryn Empire. Behind him, 216 additional vessels hung in space like a swarm of steel predators. He had commanded fleets for 40 years, conquering 12 star systems personally. Never in all that time had he been summoned with such urgency. The message from Commander Vexal had been alarming. A single primitive vessel had somehow disabled half his fleet. Threx had initially dismissed it as incompetence, but the battle recordings told a different story. The human ship moved with purpose and precision that suggested extensive combat experience. Their weapons, though primitive in appearance, were devastatingly effective. War Master, his communications officer spoke. We're receiving a message from the human vessel. Put it through, Threx commanded, his scales rippling with anticipation. He expected pleading, perhaps an offer of surrender now that the human saw the true might of the Kryn Empire. Instead, a female voice came through, calm and almost casual. War Master Threx, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Human Confederation. I'm transmitting coordinates for your fleet's withdrawal from this sector. You have 30 minutes to begin your departure or we will be forced to take action. Silence filled the bridge. Then slowly Kryn officers began to laugh. The sound built into a roar of derision. One small ship was giving orders to an armada. The audacity was almost admirable. Threx silenced his crew with a gesture. Captain Rodriguez, I admire your courage, foolish though it may be. You have disabled a few ships through surprise and trickery, but tricks only work once. You face the full might of the Kryn Empire now. There will be no escape, no mercy, and no second chances. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will atomize your vessel. The response came immediately. War Master, I need to correct a misunderstanding. The Prometheus isn't giving you orders, I am. And I'm not asking you to surrender to one ship. I'm asking you to surrender to humanity. Threx's amusement faded. You speak nonsense. Our sensors show only your vessel. There are no other ships within light years of this position. That's what your sensors show, Elena agreed. But your sensors are designed to detect Kryn technology. You've never encountered human stealth systems before, War Master. I'm going to do you a courtesy because I'd prefer this ends without bloodshed. I'm going to show you what you're really facing. On the Prometheus, Elena nodded to Marcus. Drop the veil. Marcus's fingers moved across his console, deactivating the quantum dampening field that had been active since they'd entered the sector. Immediately, the Kryn sensors began screaming alerts. The pack reveals itself. War Master Threx watched in disbelief as his sensor displays transformed. Where there had been empty space, signatures began appearing. 1, 10, 50, 100. The numbers climbed rapidly. Tactical analysis, he roared. His tactical officer's voice shook as he delivered the report. War Master, I'm counting 347 human vessels. They formed a complete sphere around our position. Frigate-class ships, destroyer-class cruisers, and... He paused, his scales paling. 15 dreadnought-class vessels, each one larger than the immortal Conquest. Impossible, Threx whispered. When did they arrive? How did they mask their signatures? His science officer provided the answer, though it brought no comfort. War Master, they've been here the entire time. Their stealth technology is unlike anything in our database. They've been watching us since we arrived. Elena's voice came through the communications channel again. Now do you understand, War Master? The Prometheus wasn't a lone mining ship that got lucky. It was bait, and you took it perfectly. Threx felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, fear. Not for himself, but for his entire species. The Kryn had built their empire on one fundamental principle. They were always the strongest force in any engagement. They overwhelmed their enemies with superior numbers and firepower. But now, for the first time in their history, they were outmatched. What do you want? Threx asked, his pride crumbling. I want you to listen, Elena replied. 5 years ago, humanity reached the stars. We were excited, curious, hopeful. We encountered 7 different species in our first year of exploration. 6 of them welcomed us, shared knowledge, and became our friends. The 7th was you, her voice hardened. You captured our first diplomatic ship. You executed our ambassador on live transmission to show other species what happens to those who trespass in Kryn space. You didn't even try to communicate. You just killed them and moved on. Threx remembered that incident. It had been standard procedure. Nothing more than another day in the expansion of the Empire. We studied you after that, Elena continued. We watched how you conquered the Velic system, how you enslaved the Taurian people, how you destroyed the Cliff civilization when they refused to surrender. We documented everything, and we realized something important. She paused, letting the tension build. The Kryn Empire exists because you've never faced a real predator. You've spent 3 centuries hunting herbivores and convincing yourselves you're apex hunters. But humanity evolved differently. We didn't evolve as the biggest or the strongest. We evolved as the smartest, the most adaptable, and the most ruthless when threatened. The human doctrine on the Prometheus. Elena stood before her tactical display, watching the Kryn armada. Every ship was tracked, every weapon system analyzed, every potential move calculated. This was what humanity did best. Gather information, identify patterns, and exploit weaknesses. Sarah, she spoke into her command channel. Status on the fleet? Engineer Sarah Okonkwo's voice came back immediately. All ships report ready, Captain. The dreadnoughts are charging their main cannons. Frigate wings are in attack formation. We have complete tactical superiority, Marcus added his report. Their ships are powerful, but they're designed for overwhelming weaker opponents. They have minimal point defense, weak lateral shields, and their formations are optimized for intimidation rather than actual combat efficiency. They've never needed to fight a peer opponent, Elena nodded. It was exactly as Earth Command had predicted. The Kryn were lions, powerful, intimidating, and dominant when facing prey. But humanity had learned long ago that even lions could be brought down by a coordinated pack of smaller predators. "War Master Threx," she said, reopening the channel. "I'm going to demonstrate something now. Please watch carefully." She nodded to Marcus, who designated a single Kryn destroyer on the tactical display. It was positioned at the edge of their formation, slightly separated from its neighboring ships. "Fire Solution Alpha," Marcus commanded. 10 human frigates broke formation simultaneously, accelerating to attack speed. The Kryn destroyer detected the threat and opened fire, its plasma cannons tracking the approaching vessels. But the human ships didn't attack from one direction. They came from multiple vectors, weaving through the plasma fire with coordinated precision. The destroyer's shields held against the first volley of kinetic rounds. Then the second wave hit. These weren't standard penetrators. They were electromagnetic pulse bombs designed to overload shield generators. The destroyer's defenses flickered and died. The third wave came immediately after, breaching charges that attached to the hull and detonated in sequence, creating a cascading failure that spread throughout the ship. Within 45 seconds, the destroyer was disabled, its crew alive but helpless. The 10 human frigates returned to formation without a scratch. "That was one ship," Elena said quietly. "We disabled it in under a minute without losing a single vessel. Now imagine what we could do to your entire fleet." Threx watched the replay of the attack on his displays. His tactical officers were analyzing it frantically, looking for countermeasures. But the more they studied it, the more apparent the truth became. The humans weren't just technologically advanced. They fought with a coordination and tactical sophistication that the Kryn had never developed because they'd never needed to. "You've made your point," Threx said, his voice heavy with defeat. "What are your terms?" The new order. Elena took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Earth Command had spent 2 years planning this operation, waiting for the right moment to show the Kryn and the entire galaxy that humanity was not prey. "Here are the terms," she began. "First, the Kryn Empire will withdraw from all occupied systems. The species you've enslaved will be freed. The colonies you've established on conquered worlds will be evacuated." "Impossible," Threx protested. "That's our entire empire. Generations of expansion. You ask us to abandon everything?" "I'm not finished," Elena continued. "Second, the Kryn will pay reparations to every species you've harmed, resources, technology, whatever is needed to help them rebuild. Third, your military will be reduced to a defensive force only. No more conquest, no more expansion into unclaimed space without proper diplomatic channels." "You would destroy us," Threx said bitterly. "No," Elena corrected. "We would civilize you. There's a difference. The Kryn can have a future, War Master. You can trade, explore, and grow. But your days of conquest are over." Threx's scales darkened with rage and humiliation. "And if we refuse? If we choose to fight?" Elena's expression didn't change. "Then we'll show you what total war looks like when humans wage it. We've studied your empire, War Master. We know where every colony is located, every supply line, every military installation. We have 300 allied species ready to support us. And we have something you don't." "What's that?" Threx asked. "Patience," Elena replied. "The Kryn think in terms of quick conquests and overwhelming force. Humans think in terms of generations. We'll blockade your systems, cut off your resources, and wait. We'll support resistance movements on every world you occupy. We'll turn your empire into a prison of your own making. And we'll do it without firing another shot if necessary." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "But make no mistake, War Master. If you force us to fight, we won't stop until the Kryn Empire is nothing but a memory, because that's what humans do when we're threatened. We don't just defeat our enemies. We make sure they can never threaten us again." The bridge of the immortal conquest was silent. Threx looked at his officers, at the displays showing the human fleet surrounding them, at the tactical analyses that all concluded the same thing. They would lose this fight. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually and certainly. "I need to consult with the High Council," Threx finally said. "You have 6 hours," Elena replied. "After that, we'll consider your silence and answer and act accordingly." The channel closed, leaving Threx alone with the ruins of Kryn pride. The message spreads. While the Kryn deliberated, Elena sent a message to Earth Command. It was brief and to the point. Phase 2 complete. The Kryn are considering terms. Recommend we prepare for Phase 3 regardless of their answer. Admiral James Carter responded within minutes. His weathered face appeared on her screen, showing the concern of a man who'd spent 40 years in military service. Captain Rodriguez, you've done excellent work. But I need to know, if they refuse, can we actually follow through on your threats? Elena didn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Our fleet is positioned. Our allies are ready, and our intelligence on Kryn operations is comprehensive. But I don't think it will come to that. Why not? Because the Kryn are predators, sir. And predators understand dominance. We've shown them they're not at the top of the food chain anymore. They'll adapt or they'll die, and the Kryn haven't survived this long by being stupid. Carter nodded slowly. The other species are watching this, you know. Every civilization in this sector is monitoring these transmissions. What happens here will determine how the galaxy sees humanity for generations. I know, sir, Elena replied. That's why we had to do it this way. We couldn't just be another peaceful species asking for our place at the table. We had to show them we could take it if necessary, but that we'd prefer not to. Speak softly and carry a big stick, Carter quoted. More like speak clearly and show them the stick is real, Elena corrected with a slight smile. The galaxy has enough conquerors, sir. It doesn't need another one. But it does need someone willing to stop the conquerors. And you think that's humanity's role? Elena looked at the tactical display, at the hundreds of ships under her indirect command, at the Kryn fleet still trying to figure out how they'd been so thoroughly outmaneuvered. I think it's one of our roles, sir. We're good at a lot of things. Exploration, science, art, diplomacy. But we're also really, really good at one other thing. Protecting what we care about. The galaxy is full of species that just want to live in peace. Someone needs to make sure they can. Carter was quiet for a moment. You sound like you're starting a speech, Captain. Maybe I am, sir, Elena admitted. Because if the Kryn accept our terms, this is just the beginning. There are other aggressive species out there, other empires built on conquest. And they're all watching right now, trying to figure out if humanity is a threat or an opportunity. And what do you want them to conclude? That we're both, Elena said firmly. That we're the friends you want and the enemies you don't. That humanity will trade with you, learn from you, and stand beside you. But if you threaten us or those we protect, you'll discover why we're the most successful persistence hunters Earth ever produced. 5 hours and 43 minutes after Elena's ultimatum, War Master Threx reopened the communication channel. His scales had lost their vibrant color, and he looked older than he had before. Captain Rodriguez, he began, his voice carefully neutral. The High Council has reviewed your terms. They are harsh. They will require us to dismantle much of what we've built. They will require you to dismantle what you've stolen, Elena corrected gently but firmly. Threx inclined his head in acknowledgement. Perhaps. The Council has decided to accept your terms with one addition. Elena raised an eyebrow. What addition? We request that humanity oversees the transition. We don't trust ourselves not to interpret the terms favorably, and we don't trust the species we've conquered not to seek revenge while we're weakened. It was a clever move, Elena had to admit. By asking humanity to supervise the dismantling of their empire, the Kryn were essentially making humans responsible for ensuring it happened fairly. It would tie up human resources and attention for years, possibly decades, but it would also establish humanity as the peacekeepers of this sector. As the species other civilizations turn to for justice and protection, I'll need to consult with my superiors, Elena said, but I believe we can agree to that. There's something else, Threx continued. Something the High Council wants you to know. In 300 years, the Kryn have never surrendered. We've never backed down from a fight. But we're not fools. You could have destroyed my fleet. You could have fired on us the moment we arrived and wiped us out before we knew what was happening. But you didn't. You gave us a choice. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The galaxy will remember this day as the day the Kryn Empire fell. But perhaps they'll also remember it as the day we learned that strength isn't just about weapons and conquest. I don't know if the Kryn can change centuries of culture and instinct. But if we can, it will be because you showed us there was another way. Elena felt a wave of emotion she hadn't expected. This was what they'd hoped for. What Earth Command had gambled everything on. Not just defeating the Kryn, but changing them. War Master, she said softly. Every species in this galaxy evolved to survive. The Kryn evolved as hunters, and that made you strong. But humans learned something important in our history. The greatest predators aren't always the ones with the biggest teeth. They're the ones smart enough to know when to hunt and when to cooperate. She stood from her command chair, addressing not just threats but every being listening to this transmission across the galaxy. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find friends. We found some and we're grateful for them. But we also found empires like yours that see kindness as weakness. So let this be a message to everyone watching. Humanity will be your friend, your ally, your trading partner. We'll share our knowledge, our culture, our resources. Her voice hardened. But if you threaten us or those under our protection, you'll learn why we're called the apex predators of Earth. You'll learn why every other species on our planet either fled from us, died out, or was domesticated. You'll learn that when humans decide to hunt, we don't stop until the threat is ended. She paused, letting the words sink in across countless star systems. The choice is yours. Work with us and we'll build something amazing together. Work against us and you'll discover why even the word humanity comes from our ability to be both compassionate and ruthless in equal measure. The new dawn 3 months later. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of Earth Station Alpha, watching supply ships ferry resources to former Kryn colonies. The dismantling of the Empire was proceeding ahead of schedule. Freed species were rebuilding and, surprisingly, many Kryn were helping them. Admiral Carter joined her at the window. "You've started something big, Elena. Half the galaxy is requesting human peacekeepers. The other half is terrified of us." "Good," Elena replied. "Fear and respect are useful tools when used correctly, but we need to make sure we don't become what we defeated. The Kryn fell because they forgot that power without wisdom is just tyranny with better weapons." "Wise words," Carter agreed. "The Council is officially offering you a promotion. They want you to command the new galactic peacekeeping force." Elena smiled. "I'd rather stay in the field, sir. Send someone else to manage politics. I'm better at showing aggressive species why diplomacy is preferable to the alternative." Carter laughed. "That's exactly why they want you. But I'll tell them you declined." "What will you do now?" "The Prometheus needs a refit," Elena said. "And there are reports of a species in the Outer Rim making threats against some mining colonies. I thought I'd take my crew and have a conversation with them." "A conversation?" Carter repeated with amusement. "We're very persuasive," Elena said innocently. "We'll start with words. If that doesn't work, we'll move to demonstrations. If that still doesn't work," she shrugged, "then they'll learn the same lesson the Kryn did." As she walked away, Carter called after her. "Elena, what you said about humanity being apex predators, do you really believe that?" She stopped and turned back. "Admiral, humans hunted woolly mammoths with sharpened sticks. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We built cities in deserts, jungles, and frozen wastelands. We split the atom and touched the stars. We've never been the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest. But we've always been the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and the most dangerous when provoked." She smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who knew exactly what she was. The Kryn thought they were the real beasts of this galaxy. They learned they were wrong. Any other species that needs that lesson? We'll be happy to teach them. With that, Captain Elena Rodriguez returned to her ship, ready to show the galaxy that when aliens called for reinforcements, they should make sure they weren't calling them against humanity. Because when humans answered that call, they didn't come as prey. They came as the apex predators they'd always been.